Hi, everybody. It's June 11th, 2020. We're almost halfway through the year. It's day 44 of my vlog. Um, the title is In the Wilderness God's High Expectation of Leadership. Just the title alone makes me shiver, being a pastor. The pressure that God puts, I don't know if pressure is the right word, the expectation that He puts on us. So we're back in Deuteronomy 32, 51, and 52, where Moses is being told he can't go into the promised land because he struck the rock twice instead of speaking to it as God had told him. After almost 40 full years of leading God's people through the wilderness, of taking the burden of leadership, of standing between God and the people, when God had had enough with the people, Moses has a colossal failure. Leaders fail sometimes toward the end of their career. People that have been with God, and they have a tremendous failure, and it's a scandal in the church. He strikes the rock twice to get water out of it when God told him to just speak to it. And God, because of that, said, Moses, you can't lead the people into the promised land. You will die in the wilderness. And I've always struggled to understand why. And many commentators say, well, it's because Moses crucified Christ the rock a second time, figuratively speaking. And that may be true. I kind of lean toward the fact that being true. But when God told Moses why he didn't go, why he was upset with him, angry with him over it, God gave a very different reason. Deuteronomy 32:51 says this, because you sanctified me not in the midst of the children of Israel. And in Numbers 20 verse 12, God adds this, you believed me not. You didn't think speaking to the rock would be enough. I need to address that for a second. I believe Moses knew speaking would bring water. But Moses wanted more. And he wasn't willing to wait for God. He wanted the people to stop driving him crazy with complaining and murmuring. I mean, he calls them rebels here. He goes, must I get you water, you rebels? That's manipulation with anger. That's not trusting God. Anytime people don't get this, anger, and this is a bunny trail, but anger is a form of manipulation, a form of not trusting God in many cases. So there's two failures on Moses' part. Number one, he didn't think God's word was enough to resolve all the problems involved. So in his frustration with constantly complaining people, he went beyond what God asked. Because he did speak. How many times do we go beyond in frustration? I mean, we trust God and then we think we have to help God out. Well, that's what Moses did. Then the second thing that says he did not sanctify God in their eyes. And I actually think this is a bigger problem. All that means is this. He did not make God look good in his behavior. To sanctify God is to honor him in what you do, to obey him, trust him, to reflect God's goodness in what you do, kind of like saying God is love, but I'm not going to be. After 40 years of being the friend of God, and that's what God called him, which is pretty incredible. God said, most people, I speak to them in visions and dreams, but Moses is my friend. I speak to him face to face. But after 40 years of this, he dishonored God in dealing with yet another problem in the midst of God's people. He'd had one too many. And he violated the principle of Matthew 5:16 that says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works. Works that manifest a trust in God is what that means. And glorify your Father which is in heaven. So in closing, in dealing with the problems of life in this world, do I sanctify God in the eyes of those watching? Do we make God look good? Because Moses didn't do that, God denied him the privilege of leading his people into the promised land. He lost a blessing. The question is this: what blessing are you losing because you are not sanctifying God before people in what you do? I think about these protests. I mourn and grieve for all that's going on. But if believers that are participating need to ask themselves, and I'm not saying they shouldn't participate, they need to ask themselves, are you honoring God in how you're doing this? Are you making God look good? May God bless you today.